Welcome to the Expansion Codes podcast. I'm Bianca Iono, creator of Aligned Wealth Energetics. Now, this episode is for you if you're an established entrepreneur and you can see your next level clearly, but something invisible keeps pulling you back. You're doing everything right strategically, but there's this weird friction between the results you're creating and the expansion that you know is possible. And today I'm sharing what happened when I turned my next level methodology back on myself and how I dissolved a 30-year-old pattern in just 15 minutes. And honestly, the shift was so deep, revolutionary, and complete and continually unfolding that I actually had to go back through old journal entries and ChatGPT conversations just to remember how I used to operate. Now, this is about the pattern that I couldn't see, what it cost me, and what changed in the weeks after I dissolved it, including how my entire relationship to visibility shifted, how I stopped over explaining everything, and why I can sell speed and ease as a feature of my work instead of constantly trying to brace for it or justify or mitigate my responsibility for how powerful, how deep, how fast this work really is. So if you've ever felt like you're holding yourself back from something that you know you're capable of, this one is for you. I've spent over a decade helping entrepreneurs at your level, but if you want to go straight to the source and discover the exact subconscious pattern creating your ceiling, I've created a free 2-minute expansion audit that shows you which pattern is running your business right now and what becomes available when you solve it. Go to www.biancaa.com/audit for your copy now. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you how I shifted a 30-year-old pattern in just 15 minutes. Totally blew my mind. And I'm really lucky because it's a few months on. And fortunately, I've written a few of these pieces down because the rewiring happens so significantly. You get amnesia about how you were operating before. So I've just been going through some of my past ChatGPT conversations to see how my behaviors, how my view of the world has changed since pulling this massive encoding out of my subconscious and shifting me into a new timeline. Okay, so I first came across havening when I was in a business mastermind event, and I came across this beautiful wahine, beautiful woman, Kamaya, and it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're my people. It's a neuroplasticity tool that helps you create safety in your body and remove distressing emotions and meanings around a traumatic event in the past. That's how I was introduced to it. And I didn't really think I needed it. I was like, oh, I don't really have any bad shit that's happened to me. But what came along was I did actually have something that had happened in a ceremony in a teepee where I was fully triggered. It was just bad facilitation. It was poor luck. It was a comedy of errors. But what ended up happening is I got locked into a traumatic memory of mine from when I was younger. And I also got interrupted trying to talk to a friend and explain to them where I was before and where I am now. And thank you so much. And, there was just this awful clash of cultures that ended up being a Native American man on Aboriginal land telling a Polynesian woman, it's time to be quiet now. And so I actually found after that, I think I was dissociated because I had suicidal ideation for weeks afterwards. I just kept on seeing myself driving off a cliff. I couldn't tap into my worth. I had no inherent worth. I had no sense of worthiness as a person. And it was kind of like, it felt like this Native American elder had pulled back a bow, had let go of this arrow and had trapped me in the trauma of colonization, of the modernity expressed trauma of being ripped away from your culture. That was the displacement that I felt growing up as a little brown girl in a family that was filled with beautiful blonde haired, green-eyed, pale skin women. And so that displacement, that lack of belonging, because I was telling the story and it wasn't actually the point of my story. I remember just not feeling like I had any sense of safety. I couldn't grab onto any sense of inner authority or inner agency. And I remember looking at my child and going, I am wrong. I am wrong, but at least I can look at my child and see that's something good that I've done in the world. So because she is pure and beautiful, I must be okay at least a little bit. I must have the right to exist at least a little bit. I also remember, there was a lightning storm that was happening, and I wanted to go run out into the storm and get hit by a bolt of lightning. So once that kind of passed, once I found my way, once I used different tools to help me realize that it wasn't that my story that I was trying to tell was inherently not worthy of being heard, it was that the audience wasn't worthy of hearing it. But whatever. The point really was for me is that over the next 12 months, I probably would think about that thought 15 to 30 times a day, some days, at least every day. And even though it didn't have the same visceral emotion attached to it over time, it just was constantly kind of like a naughty kid in a classroom would use a pen to blow a spitball at the teacher. It was like there was this awful part of me that constantly wanted to come and peck my head like a hen and a pecking order to say, see, that's why. And just really random places to almost event drop this traumatic experience into my daily life. And so I'd met Kamaya, who became a dear friend, and she did this havening practice on me. And within 15 minutes, it was so simple and so quick. I was just like, okay, great. Thank God I can finally move on. I couldn't access the same memory. I moved on. I was able to access different learnings around it. It stopped being so prevalent in my mind. And it really felt like, okay, I can move on. Now, and I think a few months later, I remember going, and I think she messaged me back in about, 2 weeks to 4 weeks later to say, hey, how many times have you been thinking about the event? And I was kind of like, oh, fuck, I've gone all this time and I haven't thought about it at all. So that was amazing. But maybe a year had passed from there, and I just started finding that the thoughts were popping in through different little access points. And she'd said, listen, we probably should do another session. Let's do a session again, because these memories can find different, because these memories are kind of like a tumor, and it can have different blood vessels. And so you might be able to cut off all these different other blood vessels to it, but it still has these sneaky ways of getting back in. And so all we have to do is it's like surgical precision. It is like memory surgery, but cut off the blood flow and the blood supply to that memory and that event. And what happens is you can still retain all the learnings and the experience and know that happened, but it doesn't have any of the emotional charge. What ended up happening, I just never got around to doing that. But the next time we spoke, I ended up doing her pilot program, which was actually about let's release your fear of the future. Now, because being an overachiever is just synonymous for being under realistic, or just not listening very well, because your mind's going at 100 miles an hour. And so in my mind, her activity for me was, imagine if nothing went your way. Imagine if everything went wrong, nothing went your way. What's the worst possible outcome that might happen in the future for you? Now, for me, because I'm always doing goal setting and vision mapping, it's part of who I am every single day, that I'm constantly anchoring my clients' vision and their desires into their trajectory of their success. I immediately just wrote out my version of true wealth and what I'm calling in and moving into. And then I went into what is my greatest fear if my version of success came true. I don't know. It's just the way I thought it. And it took me even like months to realize I'd actually done it wrong, but it was so visceral. So when I sort of tuned into myself and I thought, what is it that I am afraid of if all my dreams came true? And in my mind, it went straight to a black and white Western movie where, there's nothing happens, a tumbleweed goes past, and you hear that. That's my version of the Western standoff music. But that like vast, desolate, barren landscape is something that my subconscious really attached to if I were to get all of my dreams, all of my hopes fulfilled, then there would be nothing left to do. And I know that this was always a dysfunctional way, because when people would be like, oh, wouldn't it be so great to win the lotto? I would be like, oh, a bit disappointed. It means it's over. The puzzle's over. And so this, as it turns out, has been a fear that keeps me in that searching, striving, hustle mode, because it feels like I would be bereft of purpose. There would be nothing. There'd just be barrenness, the nothingness. It would just be the nothing, from the never ending story, the nothing. Now, my subconscious is incredibly imaginative and hyper-specific, especially using pop culture references. So my brain then was like, oh, wow, so what do I believe is going to happen next? And I actually went straight to, if you've ever seen Terminator 2, I went straight to that scene where Sarah Connor is having this dream about the future, and she's looking from behind a barbed wire fence, and she's looking at this beautiful scene of her, a version of her looking after little kids. And then what happens is AI, Skynet, creates this big, massive nuclear bomb, and then explodes, and all the little kids and all the beautiful scene of the happiness and the laughter and being on swings, it all gets burnt, incinerated, and goes to dust, while Sarah Connor in the background is grabbing on the fence, going, no, 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 trying to save them. Now, I was doing this activity whilst preparing dinner, and this is what was, showing up for me. I went and looked at the YouTube clip, and I'll reference this in the show notes below. And I'm watching it, and the emotion that came over me, just sobbing, the pure devastation I felt. If I were to achieve all my dreams, then AI, Skynet, would come and blow us all up and turn us into smithereens. So that was the little thing that unlocked for me of, holy crap, there's some weird shit going on in your brain, Bianca. So anyway, we ended up doing the process. And so what happened for me, even within the first 5 minutes of me being able to activate the stimulus, which was like 11 out of 10, activate the stimulus and then the stress. And then with those stress receptors activated, now I'm doing the somatic touch and being distracted. And so now my brain is getting the signals that that's no longer a memory that creates trauma. And so what I think I discovered is that immediately my body was able, or my brain, or my higher self was able to shift the story around it and just create a new narrative. And what I realized is that, if all of my family gets blown up into smithereens and turned to dust, well, we'll all just be dust and air and light together, and we'll be together forever in the infinite, invisible, wide beyond. And we'll just all be connected in the divine oneness that combines us all. And I was like, oh, and the only thing there is just divinity, like the Holy Spirit. We're going to be a part of the holy consciousness that brings us all together. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm great. Amazing. Bring it on. And then there was the other part where I also had to go into, and I didn't have to do it. The memory shifted, the relationship shifted. And so the other part was Sarah Connor. And I had to go into Sarah Connor's flight and fight of feeling like she has to protect the world and stop this from happening, to just be like, it's okay. We're all together. Live your life. It's your life to be lived. And then when you turn to dust, you just come back with us. And it was so delightful. It was so wonderful, so peaceful. I ended up just kind of laughing, and realizing there's a version of me holding myself back from my most profitable self-expression, because I'm worried that then I will have no purpose and meaning. And this is very much this would have been, picked up in my mother's womb and in my grandmother's womb. My grandmother was raised in the Great Depression. And, my great grandmother, she was the genteel poor. So there's such a lineage then of settlers, of battlers. There's even Jewish ancestors that I have discovered through my ancestry research. And so this poverty consciousness, this pious suffering, all wrapped up in trying to keep me safe and trying to keep me squashed, and just gone. Now I'm talking about a 30-year-old pattern that's really, hundreds of years old, maybe thousands of years old, that's just been carried down in the express genetics and shown up. And so from that, what happened and what changed in my life? Well, what I realized is that in every day after this, I realized how quickly my body would get put into flight or fight, how comfortable, I might just had an apple wrong and then the kid would crack it. And normally I would set up into flight or fight like there's somebody's going to die. What I noticed was the discrepancy between the feelings of safety and the feelings that I was just running my day through. You've now had the taste of what real premium fuel is like, and running off premium fuel where your actions are calm, they're concentrated, they're focused, versus running on frenetic energy. And I'm just thinking just crappy. I don't even know much about fuel, but just think about crappy fuel. And feeling this dissonance was a very visceral experience. But it was only until later on that night, after I'd had been running off from calls and I hadn't really had much time to sort of sit and realize. And then I'm sitting down eating my dinner. And I was like, oh my God, there is nothing in my brain. I am fully, completely present. The only thing that's in front of me right now is this beautiful salmon meal, this beautiful succulent salmon meal, and nothing else. I didn't realize how much of my life was spent, how much of my brain space was spent in hyper-vigilantly scanning for the future, into the future, looking for problems so I could solve them, so I could feel safe, meaningful, valued, and have belonging and connection in the world. And because if I had ease, if I had completion, if I had this feeling of arrival, then the whole world would blow up. So we've ripped this belief, and now I have this presence, and I'm like, Pete, there's nothing in my brain except what's exactly in front of me and what's happening right now. What is going on? I said, Pete, is this all that's in your mind? He's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, before I was always thinking about all the different things just in case Sarah Connor came and and the AI all blew us up. And now all I've got is this, like, what's here in front of me? And he's like, I'm not even thinking about anything right now. He goes, you got a weird brain, don't you? Oh my God, I guess so. And so that shift was so visceral. The contrast was so massive that it was like stepping out of the carbon copy of me, this future projected self, holographic self that I'd been moving in and that I'd been leading with, that was constantly battling against an Armageddon, which probably is why I love dystopian movies so much. The feeling of dread, the feeling of like, we've got to figure this out, the resourcefulness, it is so calming to my nervous system, because it's kind of like if we just think of all the horrible, like the worst things that could happen, then we can make a plan and safeguard against it. That's basically how my brain works. And that's obviously how my Caucasian, my European ancestors worked. They were like hardcore settlers into Australia from all different parts of the world, and they battled it out here. So just feeling the way how resilient they are and how that's being arised and expressed in me was huge and was massive. And so now I have this imprint. Now I am saying, oh, there's something really big and exciting about this work. I feel like I am moving into the version of me I always knew was possible, but was holding myself apart from, because if I really stepped into that, then there would be no more puzzles left to fix and I would be bereft. And so I decided to go and do my havening certification with Kamaya, jumped on a plane, went over there to Whangarei. And it was also really fascinating because when I went over there, I'd just been able to nail through time the Māori ancestor that has given me 3% of Māori DNA and finally put a name to my family tree. It is a predecessor of an ancestor of Te Whero, who is the first Māori king. And now just to give you a little bit of insight, for your DNA cousins, there might be like, I think there's like 20,000 DNA matches that come up on my ancestry.com results. And of those, there's maybe about 60 to 80 who has Te Whero Whero in their family tree. And so I rock up to this certification. I get partnered with the Tane who is doing the karakia, the blessing, and I help shift his trauma and he helps shift mine. And then we find out that he's actually a direct descendant, that we're actually DNA cousins. We're actually real whakapapa, which just blows my mind how the interconnectedness of all of this weaving is happening. The chances of me meeting somebody who represents the mere sliver of people on this earth who has that exact same ancestor still blows my mind to this day. It's a nice little trick that the ancestors love to play on me after many years of trying to find that name. But anyhow, so I end up getting there. And what happens is, again, I'm not really quite sure what needs to shift, but I ask myself that question. If something is showing up in your life that you wouldn't consciously choose, then it means that you are subconsciously choosing it and co-creating it. So I thought, what is showing up in my life that I wouldn't consciously choose? Well, I can see that I would love to be more visible than I am. And yet I do feel myself pulling myself back. And if I say I want an audience, I say I want a bigger audience, and yet I can see myself just still perfectly being happy, being a best kept secret. And so I said, where do I think this fear of visibility comes from? And what's really interesting is, I went straight to an indecent assault that happened when I was 11, except my subconscious went past that and went straight to a memory of when I was about 7 years old. So when I was 7, we'd moved to a new town, moved to a new school, and I could walk home in maybe about 10 or 15 minutes. And mum and dad were really, really strict on saying, you've got to walk this way so that if anything ever happens, we know which way you went and we can track back. Now, me being the little rule breaker, eventually I got bored of going that way. And so I used to just go different ways to find out which way, was fun. And so I remember I would start going this different way and saying hi and hi, how are you? And, waving to people as this little 7-year-old. And I remember this thought dropped in, and it was, if you get stolen, your mum and dad will never know where you are. This is how little kids get stolen. And I think what happens there is that my expectation of the world, it's also deeply tied into, that's right. It's also deeply tied into this way that I can see carried through for women. It's also collectively in my family. There's always been that thing of, you want to be safe in the world by being attractive, by being pretty, by being desirable under the male gaze, whilst also not being too attractive, too attention seeking that you get violated. And my brain also takes me to, there's a scene in The Girl with a Pearl Earring, I believe, with Scarlett Johansson, and she's pushed up again in like the 1800s. She's like a milkmaid. And it's the thing that comes up in past hypnosis. It's something that I think must have happened to one of my ancestors, and that trauma gets pulled down. And I think it kind of is really there for, I believe, a lot of women, where the victim blaming, where, a woman was violated or raped, and the question is, what was she wearing, right? That was very prevalent in the attitudes towards women right up until almost the Me Too era. That was in 2017. So I believe what happened was there's this deep subconscious fear in my family line where women have been violated by men for not being vigilant enough. And here I was as a little 7-year-old putting that belief of the world is not a safe place, the world is a dangerous place. And it led to me as an 11-year-old being assaulted. In that process, we ended up going to court. It was, it was super traumatic. But what had happened was I separated myself from a cross-country running group. I'd fallen over and there's some sticky stuff on my legs. So I went into this public toilet behind a big wall. It was a ferry stop. And I've gone into the toilets, I've washed some water off me on my legs, used some soap, and then ran out. And as I ran out, I got accosted by a man. In my mind, I'd said, why did God let that happen to me? This is my little 11-year-old self. The thought was, well, if you had gone in there and gone to the toilet, you would have been trapped. He would have raped you and you would have been murdered. And that no one would ever know that, no one would ever come to your rescue. That's what my little 11-year-old brain went to. And so from there, I carried this belief that I'm only ever one or two innocuous decisions from being raped and murdered. So the world is not a safe place was then cemented by this one. And it just created another aspect to this hypervigilance of, I remember when Facebook first came out, how scared I was of random men messaging me. And what the havening did was straight away, oh, that's right. I was also taking Wachuma, a microdose version of Wachuma, which really opened my portal, really opens my psychic channels, really helps you be grounded and present in the moment. And in this place, what happened was it was like coming through and pulling out this root, this cancerous tumor, and pulling it out, roots and all. And it was first investigating or pulling apart this belief that the world is a scary place, because it took me, my subconscious took me to myself as a 7-year-old thinking that I was alone. And I actually saw a grandmother, an ancestor, just sitting there right on my shoulder the whole time. I was never alone. I had ancestors watching me. I had angels and guides or watching me from above. And if you've ever seen those toys that a kid or a toddler has, and it's just a little bubble. It's got lots of little things that maybe light up or make noises. And it's almost like a steamroller type of thing. And it has a stick attached to it. And the kid rolls it back and forth. Well, what it was showing to me, communicating to this 7-year-old version of me, was I was being looked after from high above. I was like, I was just in my little bubble. They were looking after me. They were controlling me. They were taking me on that walk. There was nothing that I was at risk of. And it actually shifted the timeline, the inherited belief around the past life or the ancestral life, that memory that had about a woman who'd been violated. It completely shifted that timeline. And then it also brought me into the present for the TP. And what I noticed, what shifted for me was that I saw myself with a different kind of commanding presence, where it was almost like an arrogance, but it's not arrogance and it's not humility, because it's really understanding yourself in right relationship with yourself and the world around you. And you are just as important as, the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rain falls, and the flowers bloom, and the bees buzz. Each one of those aspects, each one of those elements is incredibly important for the entire ecosystem, but not one in itself is more important than the other. And so this lesson that I've had for a long time about you're special, but you're not any more special than anybody else, honestly, is the biggest fucking head fuck, I think, being raised in Western society, that you're special, but no more special than anybody else. Because we're so conditioned to be shamed, to motivate ourselves to create success through our own self-rejection, through our own flagellation, self-flagellation, trying to find love and safety through achievement and through material success, whilst also believing that we don't have the worthiness as a blade of grass, as the bee that comes around and pollinates all the flowers, as the flower itself, the pollen itself. So what I noticed shifted over me was, I will speak now with the essence of somebody who has something really important to say to you. It's such a different way of being. Instead of trying to shout to be heard in a noisy marketplace, I know when I speak, I'm not speaking, trying to, like standing in the mall, trying to get people to, try your hand cream, right? I can see that I'm meant to speak to a chosen few people. I'm not for the masses, and I'm not willing to speak. I don't speak unless it's really potent. I'm actually reading off my diary, my journaling, because I forgot this part. And this is the whole thing about alignment, right? Is that you have this big identity shift, you get in alignment, you get into congruence, you get into right relationship, and then life happens and you forget the downloads. So I'm remembering even this thing of this feeling as I'm reading these words that there's a potency in silence that is deafening, that is commanding, that is your presence speaking before you even ever open your mouth. And so that was the huge, massive shift that I'd had, where something that was so insidious, that was guiding my actions, my essence, my movements through the world, of my over perfectionism, my like over articulation, my over explaining of things, trying to create safety through not ever being misunderstood. So the experience of the teepee, it's just even landing for me even more, is not that I'm a fan of re-traumatizing yourself, but I do see that the way that we have these constraints, these catalysts, this chaos from the past, there's a disturbance. If we can go in and have the tools and the courage first to look and not just ignore, if we can be brave enough to realize that we are in these patterns, chasing a sense of self through doing, through activity, through having, through accumulating things, all because we are running away feeling a feeling that once it is felt, once it is brought to the surface, we have the option of firstly rewiring and shifting to safety. But even before that, we can choose something different, and we can choose to be the person that says, that's not who I want to be leading through. But if we never go in and look at that, then it's constantly directing our boat in life with us believing it's fate. And so I thought, what has really shifted for me since then? And what I notice is that probably my whole body of work for maybe the last year and even 2 years, I often put in transcripts of things that I'm doing in sessions and ask AI, what am I doing? Because the results are really quite phenomenal, the results that I work with. And it's with high performers. So I'm thinking of Shelley, who was really tentatively pitching 6K packages. And then she'd built a 500K business and that burnt her out. And now she's building a 500K business in alignment with her values. And some of these things she just sort of casually dropped. And I was like, now you've got when you first met me, you were kind of like going back and forth and kowtowing and accommodating people for 6K invoices. Now you are commanding 120K packages and being prepared to completely walk away if your terms aren't met. And it's not posturing, it's not pretending, you're not performing. You are literally like, nah, if you're not going to come to the party with my main pillars that I need to make sure I can deliver an excellent result, then I'm not interested in doing it. And that was not the Shelley that first came to me a year earlier. Some of the results have been people who were stuck in making safe money, getting paid for the work that they could do, but didn't really light them up, and had been hiding behind the scenes for years. And then within hours of doing these sessions, then put out an offer, have 8 new inquiries and calls, and then their mind is blown with how much speed that's happening. So my clients have always been doing these big, massive shifts and trajectory shifts. I'm thinking of Lissy, who went from 20K months to 60K months, working 5 hours a week less with clients she absolutely adored working with. So those sessions were always happening, but I found it really, really hard to try to explain it. And so what's happened with me with shifting that, now I don't believe that the world is a dangerous place. I say the things that I mean without over elaborating. Now, probably over elaborating here in this podcast, but that's because this is my real vehicle for self-expression. I talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about here. But when I'm really using my positioning, when I'm really using my messaging, what has shifted has been I'm okay with being known for just one thing that I can do amazingly. It is my effortless genius, which is finding those patterns, finding those limiting ceilings, those limiting beliefs that are creating a ceiling in your business, and the identity or the memory that is keeping and holding it in place. So I can see why Havening found me and sought me out. I know when I look at some of the writing and the presenting I was doing, I was really out of my center and out of my flow in my body, trying to educate people because I couldn't figure out how to explain it well enough in all the different ways that it wouldn't be misunderstood. Because I think really what that extra trigger point was being misunderstood or being mistaken. So I asked even ChatGPT what it saw over the course of the last 6 months. I know that the caliber of client is coming to me faster and more frequently without compromise, without me taking on board clients who are at an earlier stage of business, without me having to contort and accommodate what's in front of me because I can. It's like, instead of me saying that I should serve that person because I can, it's like, no, I'm okay with holding and reserving my genius for those who can use it the most. So ChatGPT was telling me that, I've spent years seeing deeper than others and moving faster than others, connecting dots that others don't even notice, recognizing patterns before anyone else feels them, and understanding layers that often other people miss. But if I'm surrounded by people who don't see those things, I make it and internalize it as I don't belong. So therefore, in this, I don't belong in the world as a scary place. And it kicked off a survival strategy where I translate or shrink the idea, slow it down, or just start pulling it apart, kind of like, scientists looking at a frog and going, how beautiful is that frog? Let's cut it up and see what makes it so beautiful and alive. That was kind of the reductionist way that I was using my genius, and my genius is a holistic system. And so, this deep trauma of people not getting me has been this thing that I've over-explained, over-contextualized, over-taught, preempting their situation. And I think what's really shifted is I've stopped translating. I think really, with this relationship to visibility changed at the nervous system level, the visibility doesn't equal a threat anymore. And I've stopped bracing in that flight or fight before putting it out there. It's like, even this podcast right now, I haven't written any notes. I've just gone bah. So what's happened now is, in my positioning, I'm unapologetic, unshakable, unfuckwithable. It's bringing about a level of potency and precision to the way that I can create results. And so I would say, look, the biggest shift for me is having a way of holding space for many people and creating individual one-on-one results for them, even in a group environment. That's probably been the way that I'm finding new levels and new degrees of success, whilst also claiming my authority, where I'm embodying it instead of asking, what am I doing? And does this make sense? I'm just leading with it. And I think in the past, I've always pulled that back because my bluntness or my ability to perceive the truth about somebody can really hurt them. And it still happens. This still happens. That sometimes I see people far too clearly and it comes off where it's an attack, and it's really not. There's just no way to hide. And so if you're trying to hide from yourself, you're trying to hide from the truth, you're not going to get that with me. But I think here, what I was pretending was wisdom, what I was pretending was integrity, and taking great care with how I was moving through the world and what I was saying and what I was promising. It feels like it's just all dropped. It's dropped to the floor. So I have a specific one promise thread that people can work with me at various different levels, but it's still just the one promise. Dissolve the invisible ceiling that's keeping you capped, the subconscious pattern. Starting off with my book that is about to be written, Unforced. And the thesis around this is really that force stopped working at higher altitudes of success, and success amplifies and accelerates when nothing inside of you is afraid of it. So instead of outsourcing your authority, you are going to be power sourced, connected into and harnessing the current of aliveness that's in your body so you can build your business in alignment with your values instead of needing force to override them. This is where we dissolve the subconscious patterns that make bigger wins feel unsafe, so you can quantum leap your results with less effort and more joy. This is the antidote to burnout, the gateway to soul currency, the work that you do that is your mission here, that lights you up on the inside and you get paid handsomely in exchange. And the more whole you become, the more you are paid. And the more joy you have, and your success and your money no longer comes at a cost. So therefore, it's untethered from your time and your effort and your energy. So it can expand without constraint, without restriction, without it coming at a cost. This is the expansion codes. This is the skill that makes expansion feel natural. So that's my big ranty rave. I really feel like I've come to a place of arrival. I'm going to go jump in the pool and have fun with my kids, because that was a great, big, triumphant blah. One more part to this. When I was here at the retreat, and that's why I will be offering retreats as well, because I think there's a lot of value of just coming together for 2 to 3 days. Let's use precision to find these little blocks, find these memories, and let's fucking get rid of them. Let's create, and then let's surge. And then with the precision of a surgeon, let's fucking remove them. One of the things that was going on was, it was an old family venture that was coming to a close, and we were back and forth with different financial advisors, and it was super stressful, and it was creating this sense of real anxiety. And so I was using Havening just to work on the feeling. And what I felt like was the feeling of anxiety, as I kept on looking at the anxiety and releasing the anxiety and giving it safety, it disappeared straight away into, well, if I don't have anxiety, and it means I don't have to grasp for complexity to match the frequency of the anxiety. And if you don't have the complexity trying to muscle you up in knots, then what do you have from there? You have ease. And so it kind of like flipped through, and it made me think of that. All the hyper-vigilance is trying to create a very shallow, very rickety, kind of like a house of straws version of safety. It doesn't really shelter you. It just looks like it's doing it. And so what has to happen from there is, when you're completely exhausted and you can't create complexity anymore, now there has to be ease and safety. Ease, safety and ease, and it falls through, and there's all that's left is surrender. So in that space of surrender, in that massive shift, what I noticed from there is that I stopped making things harder. I allowed myself to really embody the idea that, what if less was more? What if I was creating spaces where strong women and strong leaders could be held, the ones where everyone is leaning on you and there's nobody for you to lean on? That is a promise. I'd never really uncovered that. I'd always been trying to articulate and throw values and follow the, webinar templates of this bonus and that bonus, and then realizing, holy fuck, the bonus here is actually less is more, like less homework, faster results. And so the biggest shift that I'm just remembering now is that I have always been so careful to make sure I can tell people that it takes hard work to create the results my clients create. And I'm not going to be at your beck and call. I'm not going to be your little bitch trying to help muscle you into your outcome. I think that was what I was always trying to safeguard against. But now I actually can create radical, life-changing, timeline collapsing shifts within minutes, within a single session. And for the first time, ease and speed feels not only legitimate, but part of my unique selling value proposition. I can now sell speed as the outcome. We don't have to talk about it for months. We don't have to extend it over time. And I've had people tell me, in the past, where they're saying, no, you've got to give more time to give more value, because that's what they're paying for. But if a plumber comes to your house and you've got raw sewage spurting out your taps, you don't want him to take a long time. You pay for the speed of it. And, there's that great saying about, the plumber gives a $500 invoice and the person says, 5 minutes, $500 for 5 minutes. And then he says, that's not 5 minutes, lady, that was 20 years. So realizing this place of arrival where not only can I create depth, but precision, but speed and ease with this extra little piece in my puzzle that I've been working towards, that was the big blow up. I had to be able to let that shift. I had to be able to let the idea that my life would be desolate if I figured it out, because that was available to me for a long time. And I never had the authority. I never had the permission. I never had the safety to claim it. Now I've got little kids trying to get through this door. And so I'm actually going to follow through and go jump in the pool. Kakite, bye for now. I'm so excited to share more of this with you. And hopefully let's do an experience soon. Kakite, bye for now. So if you're curious about what pattern might be running your business, I have an expansion audit at biancaray.com/audit. It'll help you figure out exactly which invisible ceiling you're hitting. And once you see it, then you can dissolve it. I'm also looking for people who want to experience this work firsthand. If you're established, hitting a plateau, and you can see the next level, but something keeps pulling you back, let's talk. Reach out through the links below. Pakite, bye now.